Welcome back to Missing. I am Tim here today with Lance. Lance, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic today, Tim. I love it when we have a guest on who can so clearly speak about one of these cold cases that we talk about. Family members will come on, friends will come on, and they're so passionate about finding justice for the individual that we're speaking about. But Tim, before we get to that, how are you?
I'm doing great over here. Thanks a lot for asking. And yes, so this episode today is part 2 of our series on the murder of Trish Haynes. And she first went missing in around May of 2018 in New Hampshire, a very familiar state from these cases that we've covered, Lance. But she was officially determined to have been murdered not long after that, in 2019, so about a year later. And this is a very strange case in that way that the authorities, it seems like they knew that she had been murdered and asked the family to kind of keep that part quiet while they worked on the investigation. And the family did for a year. But now they are done with that period of time, and they are very confused and a little upset at the state of New Hampshire for, not moving this case forward and not solving it officially. Although Trish was last seen in the company of Douglas and Ashley Smith. So a lot of our conversation here today with our guest, Chloe French, who is a former friend of both Ashley and Trish. She really grew up with both of them, so she has a very interesting perspective on both of them, and she has been advocating for this case for some years, and we are really behind this family with their fight for justice.
Yeah, you really said it there. We're behind the family. We can't thank Chloe enough for joining us, and not only joining us, but really breaking down all of these details in such a articulate manner and laying things out in a chronological way where we can make sense of it. And you did say that the family is a little bit upset with the state of New Hampshire for some of the choices that they made, but we know for certain that the more people talk about these cold cases, the more pressure is put on the state and the more movement actually happens. So this is a very solvable case. This is a very solvable disappearance, murder. That's my personal opinion on that. And the more that Chloe and other members of the family, anyone who has these types of details, the more we can hear from them, I think the closer we'll get to an answer.
Absolutely. And yeah, it does seem like a very solvable case. It seems like they have a very good idea of who they think committed the murder of Trish Haynes. Just kind of waiting now for justice to be done in the state of New Hampshire. Okay, just wanted to give a quick thank you to a few sources for clips that we play in this episode. One was from WMUR and one is from WCAX, both news outlets in New Hampshire. And there's also a clip from A&E's Live PD Wanted that aired in 2020. And there are links to these sources in the show notes.
And if you want more information, there is a Facebook page, Justice for Trish Haynes. And if anybody has any information on Trish Haynes' murder, they're instructed to call, write, or email the Office of the Attorney General. That is at 33 Capitol Street in Concord, New Hampshire, 03301. You can call them at 603-271-3671, or you can email them at attorneygeneral@doj.nh.gov.
Okay, everybody, and we will be back for final thoughts after the interview with Chloe, so stick around for that. And we're going to break real quick for commercial, and we'll be right back with Chloe French. Chloe French, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. We're so glad that we were able to connect and you were communicating with Tim, I think, over social media. And that's just the beauty of how this world works now. We put this story out there, this tragic story, this frustrating story that you're connected with. But before we get into that, can you let the listeners know who you are and a little bit on your background and what brings you to the show?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you know, my name is Chloe, and I actually went to school with both Trish and Ashley. Ashley more so. We grew up in the same small town of New Hampshire, went to the same school from kindergarten through graduation. Trish was in our school briefly, so I did, I have a little bit of a connection with her through there, but mostly my connection really is growing up with Ashley.
Okay, and how did you come to advocate for Trisha's case?
Yeah, so it all kind of came together very suddenly, very quickly, and unexpectedly. But back in the very beginning, I believe it was 2018 at this point, there was talk that Trish was missing. She hadn't officially been mentioned or named as a missing person. I don't believe there had been a report filed at that point. But again, small town, there's talk. And there was talk that people were looking for her, that they were looking for Doug and Ashley, and that something bad had happened. Didn't think a whole lot of it, knew that Doug and Ashley were a rough crowd, to say the least. So at that point in life, wasn't really connected with them, but the names all stood out to me. And then it wasn't until one day on social media, I saw an interview, and I believe it's the only interview Ashley has done on television, and it was done with WMUR, and I knew she was lying. Everything about her mannerisms, everything about the way she spoke, the words she spoke, it didn't sit right with me. And growing up with her, knowing her, I knew she was lying.
Now, we spoke with Ashley Smith. She says that she and Trish Haynes have been best friends since childhood. She says investigators arrived with a search warrant to 225 Main Street where she was staying yesterday, but won't tell her what's going on or why they are searching two other locations where she has been staying recently. Smith says she's worried about Trish Haynes, but she thinks she's just hiding somewhere. Did she ever live with you?
She stayed with me. She didn't live with me, but we're best friends, so obviously we spent some time together.
You haven't heard from her in a while? How long has it been?
It's been a while. It's been at least, I'd have to say probably July or so, June. I'm not good with dates.
They were asking her about Trish's disappearance, where she was, and Ashley was very nonchalant, very unconcerned for someone whose best friend was supposedly missing. Right off the bat, she said, I don't know why they came here looking for her, when it was not public knowledge that Trish had been last known to be living with her. So it would make sense that the police would contact you. She just seemed to be right away distancing herself from Trish. Right off the bat, she said, she's a wild girl, she'll be fine, or she's fine. And it just didn't, if my best friend were missing, I would want to be helping. I wouldn't be on TV saying, I don't know why you'd be asking me about her, and she's wild, I'm sure she's fine. And so it didn't sound right. And so at that point, I just looked up Trish's Facebook. I had seen a few posts from family members that had been looking for her. Trish, when you see this, get in touch with me. And I just started messaging them. Valerie was the first one to respond. And the more we talked, the more that I realized that something wasn't right. And now, 2025, here we are, and we know things weren't right, and we have a more clear picture of what happened, but we're still in the same boat that we were in the start.
Would you mind going back a little bit? We have given the details about Trish's story to the listeners previously, but in your words, can you take us through what happened, and from your perspective, and when this was, and the events that transpired?
Yeah, so I actually have, and I'll have to reference it, but I came up with a timeline of everything kind of as things were going on, and where there was just a lot of information to keep track of. We wanted to make sure that we kept everything straight. So it started back in December of 2017 when Trish left Florida to return to New Hampshire for that court case, um, which Tim and I had spoke about earlier, that it's common knowledge you don't typically, it's a very unusual move for law enforcement to charge a domestic violence victim with filing a false police report once they recant that report. But that is what brought her back to New Hampshire. And, from January 16th to January 28th of 2018, she was staying with her friend Becky. She was safe. She had regular contact with family, but she got bored. There was not much to do where Becky lived, not many people around, not really anything other than Becky. And that was great for a while, but Trish got bored. And she started reaching out to old friends, one of them being Ashley. And they made a plan at the end of January to spend about 2 weeks together. Trish was to go to Ashley and Doug's house for 2 weeks, and that was the plan. End of April is when things started to get messy. But between January and April, we don't have firsthand knowledge. What we are told from people who did have firsthand knowledge, Trish was not treated well. It seems that it was a steady decline in her treatment over that period. And again, it went from 2 weeks to months that she was there. Some of the children that were in the home have come forward and stated there was physical violence that they witnessed. Other people in and out of the home had witnessed similar slapping, punching from both Doug and Ashley. It wasn't just one of them, it was both of them. From what we've gathered, it does sound like Ashley and Doug may have introduced Trish to methamphetamines, something that Doug and Ashley were known for drug use. Trish was not up until that point. And that's something that her family, I don't know if they have quite accepted that, but from what I have gathered from multiple people, it does sound like they unfortunately did drag her into that hell with them. End of April, though, it is when the family was notified that something wasn't right. Sandy was contacted by the state and she was informed that Trish never showed up for her court appearance, which again was the whole reason that she had gone up there. And someone who makes the conscious decision to fly to that state to go to a hearing would be responsible enough to then show up to the hearing. So that's when they started to attempt to reach Trish, but they couldn't reach, they would briefly speak with her, but it was always through Ashley. Trish's phone was either broken or missing, but she couldn't speak with anyone. She had to call Ashley in order to speak with her granddaughter. And she did briefly speak with her a few times. The last time that Sandy spoke with Trish was on May 16th of 2018. A very brief conversation where she could hear Ashley speaking to Trish, but she was unable to interpret what was being said. Then Trish said, "I have to go," and ended the phone call. Sandy remembers that phone call because they would normally end it with, "I love you," or something other than "I have to go," and ending the phone. And that was the last time that they heard from her. According to the autopsy, her date of death was confirmed as May 18th. So that would have been 2 days after that conversation with her grandmother. Between May 19th and July 1st, Trish's family did repeatedly reach out to Ashley an attempt to speak with Trish, and it was always an excuse of she's in the shower, or she's unavailable. She just stepped out. She'll call you back. At that point, it wasn't hostile. It was just, she's not here. She'll call you later. During that time, which I actually took screenshots of, and I'm thankful that I did now, Ashley's mother, Wendy Place, made some just odd comments on Facebook, to public comments to Sandy, Trish's grandmother, specifically stating that she had spoken with Trish and Trish was safe in Vermont, and Trish just didn't want to have contact with Sandy or with anyone in the family. And it always struck me as, that is a very personal conversation. That is something that you wouldn't publicly post or say unless you wanted people to see that and you wanted people to think that was the truth. And all of those conversations are time and date stamped as after Trish was believed to be dead. So how were you speaking with her? I believe it was the first week of July in 2018, Valerie was made aware of all of this and made aware that Sandy had repeatedly tried to contact Trish. And at that point, Valerie, who lives part-time in New Hampshire, part-time in Florida, said, I'm going to go look for her. And she did. She went up to the area. She didn't know anything about Doug or Ashley. She had pictures of them that she had gotten off of their Facebooks, and she went to stores and she asked around, and she did not know anything about them, but she knew something was wrong. And then that week, in Woodstock, New Hampshire, North Woodstock, Trish was officially reported as a missing person, and that was with Lieutenant Mylar, that she was officially reported. What is interesting about that is, once that investigation began, about a month later, on August 8th, DCYF went into the home and removed all of the children from Doug and Ashley's home, and they were never returned. Those children were never allowed back with them. They've been adopted, and they're safe, and they have no contact with Doug and Ashley. And that was, within a month, which I think says quite a bit about the conditions of the home, as well as what was discovered with interviewing the children. August 28th, the Attorney General did officially announce that Trish Haynes was a missing person, and the following locations were searched. There was 608 Wild Meadow Road in Grafton, 225 Main Street in Grafton, and 91 French Hill Road in Grafton. And all three of those locations were directly connected to both Doug and Ashley in one way or another. And mind you, those three were searched with, they had a helicopter, they had dogs, they went through those locations. And then on September 1st of 2018, there were crates that were pulled out of Grant's Pond in Grafton, New Hampshire. In those crates, which has now been made public, there was a washer and dryer. About 5 days later, on September 6th, the Attorney General's office announced that the crates were connected to Trish's disappearance. And that was all. That was all that was said, that there is a connection. And at that point, things went silent until January of 2019. At that point, Trish's grandmother, Sandy, was informed that the remains in the dryer did belong to her granddaughter, Trish Haynes. But she was told that was a secret. She was told not to say anything, that she could botch the investigation, not to tell family, not to tell anybody. She did get permission to tell immediate family. I am not sure when she got that permission. I don't believe that it was that same time. If I remember correctly, it took her a few times to even be allowed that. In February of 2019, we decided to create, Valerie and I decided to create a Justice for Trish rally. That's what it started as. At that point, the family had known for about a month that Trish was deceased, and we had known since September that there was some connection to Trish. And again, there had been no media, no announcement, no anything since September. So we decided to start the rally event page, which then later turned into the Justice for Trish page. Finally, in July of 2019, the family got tired of being quiet. They got tired of Trish still being listed as a missing person, and they waited. They actually waited a full year. They waited until September of 2019 to come forward and state that no, she's not a missing person. She's deceased and has been for a year now. At that point, the same day that we went public with that, the Attorney General's office did go public as well and say, yes, she is deceased. She's no longer classified a missing person, and that, yes, it was a homicide. At that point, people started to come forward with things that they had seen, things that they knew, things that they had heard, all things that they didn't quite believe, because nobody believes that someone they knows is a psychopath. Nobody thinks someone they knows would chop another human being up and dispose of them. But it made it real when they heard she was deceased. It wasn't just a sick idea or a sick joke, or it was real. She was gone, and they had known for a year information that very well could have closed this case a long time ago.
All right, we're going to take a quick break for commercial. And just a reminder, folks, that we will return at the end of this conversation with some final thoughts.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program.
In October of that same year of 2019, there were two members of the Justice for Trish page, two members who also had come forward to detectives and shared with the detectives what they knew. And that same day that they spoke with detectives, their cars were set on fire in their driveways, in their home. The fire started about 20 minutes apart, which is about the distance that it would take to drive between the two houses. Unfortunately, charges haven't been brought forward on that as of yet. We're still hopeful, but it's quite the coincidence. Then in 2020, it was January of 2020, that's when Doug Smith went on the run. He was featured on the live PD, America's Most Wanted, and that got a huge following.
The U.S. Marshals have told us solid information from our viewers is helping them zero in on our prime suspect, Douglas Carl Smith Jr. He's a convicted sex offender, and now he's wanted for another sexual assault plus a gun charge and for failing to register as a sex offender. Authorities also want to question Smith about this woman, 26-year-old Trish Haynes, who was found inside a washing machine at the bottom of a pond. Haynes briefly lived with Smith in New Hampshire.
Suddenly, people were hearing about Trish's story from all over the country, and they all wanted to know the same thing. Why has nothing happened? And, to bring back what you had said about the power of social media, the more people that have heard about it, they all have the same question. And it's the same question we've had all along, is why has nothing been done? Doug Smith was arrested. He was found 5 months later. He was found in Vermont in June. He was arrested and has been incarcerated since then on unrelated. These are all unrelated charges from Trish. He has been up for parole and has been denied a few times due to housing situations. But him and Ashley are both, but neither one of them have been charged with anything. And unfortunately, since that, there really hasn't been any updates, any changes, anything, other than, Doug and Ashley wreaked havoc a bit with their own criminal activities, which led them to be incarcerated as we speak.
I would love to talk about what criminal activity they were up to beyond Trish's disappearance and murder.
Yeah, so Doug Smith has a criminal record dating decades at this point. We grew up again in the same small town that Ashley did. He was quite a few years older than us. He didn't go to the same school that we did. He was a problem child from the beginning. He has normal siblings, but he's been just evil. I mean, he's been bad since the beginning, and he didn't go to public school with us. He didn't live at home. He went to a troubled boys' school. So his activities, I mean, during that time, leading up to his incarceration now, he was charged with sexual assault. He was charged with firing a weapon at another vehicle, a moving vehicle, being a felon in possession of a deadly weapon, evading police, multiple things. They got him with voting fraud, which I just thought was like,
not to laugh, but my God,
I know.
You just rattled off like serious crimes.
And then in voting fraud. So they got him with multiple things. Ashley, she led police on a police chase.
A New Hampshire woman faces several charges after leading police on a car chase Friday night in Newport, New Hampshire. Around 9 p.m., police tried to stop a car driven by 29-year-old Ashley Smith of Warner for having defective equipment and no license plates. Police say she refused to stop and a chase ensued. Troopers deployed stop sticks, which are tire deflation devices, popping all 4 tires of Smith's car, though she still, again, refused to stop. The chase continued until Smith crashed into a police cruiser. Police discovered that she had 4 total warrants out for her arrest, and she was charged with felony, reckless conduct, and disobeying an officer, among other charges.
She has a criminal record, not as much so as Doug. I always thought with them it was kind of like when bad meets evil. Ashley really could have gone either way. Her environment was just, she was doomed really from the start, and nothing excuses her behavior and her actions, but she just did not get a good hand in life for sure. And Doug did. He had a very decent home, decent parents, but he there's just been something wrong with him since the beginning. And Ashley wants to fit in. She's always wanted to fit in. She's always wanted to have, her group of people or have a boyfriend. And so when her and Doug got together, I mean, it was just like an explosion, really.
Man, isn't that amazing that there are people out there who just somehow find each other? And like you said, that's the explosion. So there could have been something that happened in her life that sent her in the other direction, in another, if you came up with another scenario, if she met somebody who was a super sweet human being, maybe things wouldn't have turned out the way they did.
And she did, right after high school. I had my son my junior year of high school, and then Ashley had her daughter our senior year. And right after high school, she was doing well. She was with the father of that child. He had a job. They had a decent apartment. I actually brought her baby stuff one day. We would have been 18, and I remember walking into her apartment to bring this stuff, and I was like, good for her. She beat the odds. She made it out of the hell that she was raised in. And then they moved out west. And I had followed her, we were friends on Facebook, and that was how I had seen her looking for some baby stuff. And that was how we had kind of connected again. So I watched as they moved out there. And then maybe 6 months after that, she just started posting some, I don't know how, just too much information, things like, I hate my baby daddy. He's, whatever, things that you just don't post. And I had heard, from following her page, I watched as she moved back to New Hampshire, lived in her car for a little bit. And then I didn't see or hear much. Again, we were in two very different crowds. And then one day I saw her post that she was in a relationship with Doug Smith. And I just remember thinking like, oh, Jesus. I mean, we all knew to stay away from him. We all knew that he, at that point, had already been charged with sexual assault. And I just remember thinking, as a mom, you're a mom, why are you bringing somebody like that around your child? And that was when I just kind of was like, well, I mean, good luck, really. And I distanced myself, and which was easy because we weren't in regular contact. But I stopped, commenting on her posts. I just slowly distanced myself because, again, it was very public knowledge that there's just not Doug. There was something wrong with Doug.
A few minutes ago, you had mentioned that there was searches, and you said that the properties had connections to Doug and Ashley. Were these residents, or were these just like properties? What type of properties were they?
Yes, so two of them were residents. The home in Grafton on Wild Meadow Road, and then the home in Grafton on 225 Main Street. Those were both residents that they had rented from, that they had lived in. And then the French Hill Road in Grafton, from what I remember, it was not a home. It was almost like a dump site. There was a burn pit area, a camper, but it wasn't a home. I believe it was just kind of land that they either had frequented, but the other two, those were the homes that they had rented previously.
Like within the last couple of years?
Within the last year, yes. I don't want to get this wrong, so I'm not going to say which one, because I don't want to mix up the two addresses. But one of the homes in Grafton, Trish was living in with them. So, yes, very, very recent. One of the homes was where they were living when their children were removed. So one of them was the current residence.
All right, we're going to take a quick break for commercial. And just a reminder, folks, that we will return at the end of this conversation with some final thoughts.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program. Can you take us back a little ways to what Trish and Ashley were both like in school?
I can definitely speak more for Ashley, just because I have more experience with her than I did with Trish. Ashley, she wanted to fit in, she wanted friends. She always wanted to be in a crowd that she perceived as a cool crowd or a popular crowd. She would do anything to do that. It never worked for her. But when I say she would do anything, she would put down her friends who did like her, who did want to spend time with her, and who she didn't have to put an act on to impress. She would put them down in front of the people she perceived as cool in order to prove, I don't know, in order to attempt to get into that crowd. She got in trouble, not the kind of trouble that Doug did. And to be honest, teachers felt bad. I mean, they felt bad for that family. It was not a good situation, and the state of New Hampshire failed that family for not removing those children. There's no excuse for why those children were left in the home, and they were. So things that she did, she would steal things, little things from people's lockers, and she would get, small time detention, things like that. But again, teachers they felt bad. They felt bad for her. So it kind of skated through a bit. In high school, we were in two very different crowds. And I wasn't one of like the popular people either. We were in different crowds. I remember her being in a couple little kind of cat fight, little slapping like fights, but nothing crazy. She just always wanted to fit in and always wanted to be liked. And it was the same with Trish. Trish, I remember briefly in middle school, I left the district for a couple years and then we moved back. So I joined them again in high school. And I just remember she was sweet, she was quiet. She wasn't loudmouth like Ashley was. I don't remember her talking back to teachers or being mean to, her friends. But she always wanted to be liked as well. And that was something that was later used against her. She just desperately wanted to feel like she had a friend group. And then she left, I believe she left high school. She didn't graduate with us. I know that. She had gone down to Florida with her grandmother and was doing well. Again, she was one that I followed on Facebook, but we didn't really talk. But I would see her posts, and I remember she was working, and I just remember thinking, good for her. I'm glad things seemed like they were working out. And then she ended up back in New Hampshire, and here we are.
We had spoken to Valerie, and she had mentioned that Trish had disability checks that were coming in. I just want to get your opinion on that. Was she being used for these checks?
I believe she was getting the checks for she had some emotional developmental delays, I guess. One of the big questions that we as friends and family have had is if that benefit card was continued to be used after Trish's death. I don't know if that answers your question at all. We know she was spending her money accordingly. We don't know if she was spending it after May of 2018.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you. It's a tough question to ask because I don't want to put you on the spot or indicate something that's not true.
Right. And I did not know that Trish was receiving disability. And it was, I have friends in wheelchairs who do receive disability, and it is obvious that, why they would need it. I would be very shocked knowing the type of person that Trish was if she had not shared that information with Ashley in some way as hey, I have some money I can help out with, or, I would be shocked if she had kept that a secret from Ashley.
And were Trish and Ashley friends in school growing up?
They were. They were in that same friend group. Again, Ashley would put people down frequently. I had seen her do it not just with Trish, and there's not any specific instance I can think of, but on multiple occasions. I can remember her blurting something out about, oh, that's that boy you like, and them being embarrassed and just childish. And we were kids. I mean, we were in high school. But it continued on into adulthood as well. She just They both wanted to be liked, and Ashley is very manipulative, and Trish was easy to be manipulated. And part of it comes back to her wanting to be liked, and Ashley would push, and she would do and say things, and then come right back with, oh, you're my best friend, I love you so much, and it was almost like a abusive spouse situation, where that cycle of, okay, she hurt me, but now she loves me and that feels good, so let's stick with that. And then you mix drugs into it, and it's not good. As kids, I don't really know if I know they hung out in school and, at school dances and things like that. Ashley's house, you wouldn't go there. It wasn't habitable. I mean, it wasn't, no parent would drop their child off there for a sleepover. So, if they did more outside of school, I have no idea. But it wouldn't have been, at Ashley's house.
So where are you now with your Justice for Trish mission? Is there more events that are coming up or vigils?
Right now, winter time is a little trickier, with Val being in Florida. We are hoping to get something pulled together, which we'll have more information on. But we did want to do an upcoming thing in September. We have had more frequent meetings with investigators, with the Attorney General. Well, not with the Attorney General, with a representative from the office. At this point, we just want as many people as possible to know what we know, and to hear about her story, and to ask more questions and put pressure on detectives, because I don't know what else to do at this point. It's been a long it's been a long road. But we're not giving up, and we're just asking that people share her story and investigate the story themselves. And social media has helped solve crimes in the past, and we're a small state. New Hampshire is not a big state, and we have a lot of unsolved crimes and unsolved murders, and I don't want to be here in 25 years meeting with people about her unsolved murder.
Have you heard of other cases sort of being treated in this way by the Attorney General's office?
Yes and no. I have not heard of another missing person who has been found murdered and where that's been kept a secret. And that's exactly what it was. It was a secret we to this day don't understand why it was kept. So in that aspect, I have not heard of cases being handled that way. In the sense of the lack of communication, absolutely. We had held an event where multiple families came together, and it dated back to decades. And the common theme was that we were all told the same thing, that there is nothing new to report. It is an ongoing investigation, and they are still trying to determine what, if any, criminal charges can be brought forward. And anyone can say that for 50, 60 years. And by law, I mean, they don't have to give the family proof that they have done anything. So decades have gone by for some of these families, and they're being told the same thing. And loved ones have passed away and without knowing what happened. And that's wrong. I mean, it's 2025, and we're a small state. I mean, there's no reason, with the amount of information that the detectives know and the evidence that they have, even the circumstantial evidence, and they have part of her body. I mean, there's just no reason in my mind that Doug and Ashley could very well walk away from this.
Yeah, I know. I find it so infuriating and kind of darkly fascinating that there's, like you said, circumstantial evidence, but there's also witness accounts and a history of criminal behavior, and they search properties. I just don't understand, like, where did it stop? Like, where did they hit a roadblock that prevented them from going that next step? I don't get it. And these aren't like, I mean, you're describing Doug as evil. I mean, this is somebody who is like a career criminal, but not like a smart criminal. Like, he doesn't seem to be a criminal mastermind.
He's not. The scary part is he knows how to hold an intelligent conversation. And that's how they got by. That's how they were able to rent apartments. Speaking, because we have spoken with some of the people who rented to them. He is a liar. I mean, he will give you his real. Sometimes he gave a fake name. Sometimes he would give a real name. He would make up references that were his friends. People would call the references. I mean, he's not stupid when it comes to crime. He's just not. I mean, you could look at him and speak to him, and he comes across very, oh, yes, sir, no, ma'am, yes, well-spoken, clean cut. But then he turns around and rapes people, and those are all things that he's been convicted of, and that's evil to me. There's no remorse. I mean, again, small town, and his parents have been through a lot with him, and they're not happy with me, and for making it very public, making their son very public. But overall, they've had problems with him since the very beginning, and they're decent, normal people. There's just some people are just born evil, and that's Doug Smith.
Okay, back here for final thoughts after the interview with Chloe. First reaction, I guess, is how knowledgeable Chloe is in the case and how she kind of walked us through chronologically her story of Trish's disappearance and murder, and she seems to really have all the dates correct and all the information accurate.
Yeah, there's not much that I can say that Chloe didn't already say, other than it's always refreshing when friends and family members and other people who know these stories can come on the show and they can compliment each other. Because we recently had on her great aunt, Pilleri Haynes Alvarez, and she's coming with the perspective of a family member, and there's a lot of emotion there, and Chloe was really detailed and a lot of more of a clinical breakdown of everything, which again is always nice to have the family and the friends, if they're going to be fighting for justice here, having them compliment one another. And our listeners can hear that, and I think that just does so much for telling the story and getting that out there. any other podcasters, any other content creators who haven't covered this story really should reach out to them and get them on, because again, the more we talk about it, the more answers we'll hopefully see.
Right. And it is still a little bit confusing on why the case hasn't been officially moved forward by the New Hampshire Attorney General's office, seeing that some aspects of it seem very obvious on the surface, at least. Trish went missing. She was living with Ashley and Doug Smith, and then she was found murdered a year later. And it sure seems like there was some abuse going on in that household, and possibly much more and even darker things. So yeah, we're really confused about this one, because it's almost like I don't know. Do we say, we need tips? Submit your tips to the Attorney General, or is it like submit your letter to the Attorney General's office that demands justice? Like I feel like I'm kind of caught in the middle of asking for both of those things with this case right now.
Yeah, right? A lot of confusion and a lot of kind of head scratching on the conditions that she was living in. I mean, she was in this area because she needed to appear in court over some really kind of trivial incident. And I don't want to say that this was a fact, but the way it's been presented is that she was sort of living an enslaved lifestyle with these individuals, that they were using her and quite possibly her disability checks that were coming in. Like those, I don't know that for a fact, but those are sort of the dots that I'm connecting in my head. And honestly, in that situation with those types of people, there's always going to be a breaking point. And we see it a lot in these domestic situations, whether it's a husband and a wife like against one another, or in this case, it's a couple and you have another unfortunate individual who's been introduced into this volatile situation. And I'm also really confused and disturbed about the bone that was found in the washer dryer. It's so kind of it's such an interesting detail that I don't know, like somebody made that decision to just put that bone in like, why not bury it? Why not just throw that bone into the water in a bag with a rock? I mean, it would never be found.
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting question that, I don't have any insight into, seeing that I don't have any experience with something like that. But I believe Trish's great aunt Valerie, pretty sure she mentioned that Trish was potentially fed to animals, and that the jawbone is a part that the animal wouldn't be able to eat or digest.
Yeah, I do remember Valerie making that comment that it's the only part that a pig can't consume and digest.
Right. And we hear a lot about pig farms or pigs eating bodies, in covering missing persons cases for about 10 years, as we have here, Lance. That kind of rumor does come up more often than someone who doesn't cover missing people would think.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know where the genesis of that is. I think it's one of those things, well, if somebody is completely gone, what is the cause of that? So I think a lot of people go to that, and especially in sort of a rural area where it's more common to maybe have a farm with pigs. Again, even if that were the case, it seems so ludicrous to me to take that one bone and put it in the spot where it was probably going to be found, even though it looked like they were discarding it.
Right. I'm guessing they didn't expect it to be found. Although it sounds like from the conversation we had with Valerie that someone may have led the authorities to that pond. So it's still a little confusing. Like there's a lot of information we really don't know about who or why, or what made them come clean, if someone did come clean.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe the person who led authorities to locating the washer dryer that had the jawbone in it, maybe that person put the jawbone in it just to maybe absolve themselves a little bit of some of the guilt and give enough of an indication that Trish was no longer with us, and maybe this could lead to someone being apprehended for it. Maybe it was a way to say, like, maybe sort of get some of the weight off their chest. I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't either. But I'm sure we'll find out more once this case is brought to trial, which I have to imagine is going to happen at some point in the next few years. I know justice works very slow, and in New Hampshire, sometimes slower than your average state. But this definitely seems like a case that should be tried. Okay, everybody. Well, thanks a lot for listening. We appreciate you sticking with us in this very sad story, this murder of Trish Haynes. If you have any information, please call the New Hampshire State Police at 603-223-4381.